Thrity, I'm going to throw you an open question and let you tell me about the Heraclitus. I've just learned about your work. I think it's incredibly inspiring. And, I was just wondering what led you to sort of get involved in restoring and valuing tropical rainforests. How did you get there?
Well, it was an interesting mission because I didn't actually start in the forest. I started out on the oceans. I spent 3 years as a diver researching coral reefs. And, the coral reefs are considered to be the lungs of the ocean, the lungs of our planet in a sense. And the rainforests also, they are the lungs of our planet. But the thing that drew me in the very first instant of hearing the idea that there was a roving communications vehicle wandering the seas of the world. I was like, 27 or something, 26 actually at the time, when I first come across that idea. And that idea sparked the rest of my life. There is no doubt in my mind that everything changed in that moment when I saw and heard about this ship. And it was going onto the ocean and realizing that I knew nothing about terrestrial ecology, nothing about land. And so after becoming a coral reef expert for 3 years on this expedition, I came back to land and then fully immersed myself in land work, which was farming in an orchard, and then tree work here in Puerto Rico, where I am now, in a sustainable forestry project.
That's amazing. And I mean, I know we were just sort of talking about Mark Nelson, who I had the great pleasure of talking to in my previous conversation, who's utterly inspiring. And I just said to him, talking to him was like talking to an Apollo astronaut or something. I mean, the amazing vision and courage to be part of a project like that really blew me away. So I'm curious to know how you came across him, or how you came across the Heraclitus.
Well, again, here I was. My background is actually a weird background. Now that I'm here in a sustainable forestry project in Puerto Rico, I started off as a theatre designer in London. That was my work in my college in Nottingham. And so I did a 3-year university course in theatre design and ended up working in stage shows as a backdrop painter and a stage designer for small shows. But I worked in like large-scale theatre painting. I came to a point where I realized that I was earning a lot of money at that time, and an emergency nurse that I knew was not earning anywhere near what I was earning. And I really had to think about what I was doing in terms of like life goal. And I was very lucky to meet the October Gallery in London, which is one of the projects of the Institute of Ecotechnics, which Mark Nelson was one of the founders of. And I very soon, that is where I first saw the image of the research vessel Heraclitus. I saw this was another idea that also just blew me away, was seeing a photograph of the Biosphere 2 project. And I knew that was the moment, and it was a visual thing and a personal thing with people. And that's how I got to meet Mark, was through the October Gallery in London, which I think the school is affiliated with now. That was an incredible period of time in my life, and everything changed.
But I mean, what strikes me as really interesting about that is that, many people could have come across the Heraclitus or the October Gallery or whatever and gone, oh, how interesting, and just moved on. So there was clearly something in you that was looking for something else. The seed was already there in you.
Yeah, I think that's true. But I also, many people who have come across the Heraclitus and Biosphere 2, people do get excited by those types of things. They know there's something else going on. And I think if you have an opportunity in your life to take that path because you don't have other constraints, etc., you're going to take those paths.
I think that's really
interesting. What about you? Are you a farmer?
No. I mean, I've got an equally weird trajectory in my life because I started off a bit like you. I started off as an architect. So we were actually in very similar worlds. And, but again, like you, well, I mean, I made the assumption about you because certainly for me, from really early on, I mean, really as soon as I started studying architecture, I had the feeling that, there was something about architecture that interested me and intrigued me, but actually is not part of, it would appear, what architects actually talk about. And that began a lifelong search for what the thing was that had made me want to be an architect in the first place. And sparing you the details, because it's basically, 20 years of life story. But I realized over a long period of time that what was really missing for me was human life. Just simply life, because architecture is, if you look at an architectural curriculum, it's kind of rather self-evidently to do with buildings, it's to do with the history of architecture, the theory of architecture, construction, how to build buildings, environment, how to keep the sort of rain out and the heat in, or whatever it is. And all of these, very, very complex areas, but the building is the focus. And what's actually absolutely missing off that curriculum is, as I say, human life, or indeed nature for that matter. We're completely absent. And, of course, it's very easy for me to sort of articulate this now, but, 40 years ago when I encountered this, it was just like, this isn't what I thought it was, but it was very difficult to articulate the thing that was missing.
Right. That's really interesting that you should say that, Carolyn, because at the time when I was, at that age where, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? I could have gone into English language literature because I'm, good at writing, and I thought I could pursue a career of writing. Yeah. Or I was a good painter. I could have pursued like fine arts. But I knew there was something missing, just like you said, and it was the people aspect and the practicality of it. So again, here's the other idea that's, suddenly came up in my life. The fact that I could study theatre design. Well, it didn't mean just design. It meant that I could also read, I could write, I could make plays, I could work with other people, rehearsals, theatre, design costumes, make costumes, work on sets, make sets, all of that. And suddenly theatre in that sense became the whole picture of what I could go and do, everything that I wanted to do, not just one thing. And that was really important.
And I think also, I feel very fortunate that I did study architecture. I'm actually not being an architect anymore, but I think like an architect, and the education was incredibly broad, as I've just described. It's everything from, history to kind of working out the bending moment of a beam, and everything in between. And it's a very permissive subject that does allow, lots of architects go off to do other things that are not architecture, and it allows you in that way to do it. So I'm completely with you, and I'm also with you in the sense that I never, when I stopped studying and began practicing, and actually very, very rapidly, within 2 years I was teaching architecture back at Cambridge where I studied, but I always wanted to practice as well as teach. So like you, I didn't want to just go off into a kind of academic bubble. I wanted to keep my hands dirty and my feet on the ground kind of thing. So that was very important to me. But my light bulb moment, which was very similar to yours, was the realization about 20 years ago that I could use the lens of food to describe a city, and it came after a lot of, I went all over the world really trying to sort of search for this thing that was about somehow our relationship with buildings. It wasn't just buildings per se, but for me, architecture is about relationships, and it's about, creating spaces in which people can live well. And of course, that absolutely ought to include nature. And I believe it does much more these days in the way that it's taught than when I was studying. But, this idea that it's, it's actually about life, which of course, ultimately all the disciplines are, but the problem is that very often, that gets missed in the mix because people are so busy trying to learn, the particular discipline that they've chosen. So food for me became the ultimate sort of educational sphere in a sense, because it includes absolutely everything. You know, food is life. So it's like the ultimate permissive subject to allow you to really think about and study and do anything you want.
Yeah, whereas I think the trees are that for me, but of course, you know, you can't eat a tree, but, you know, the tree is also giving us life, so I deal with
yeah, but I mean, food leads me to trees, because without trees there is no life, you know, so food is like a kind of connector to me. It sort of sits at the nexus. So if you like, food is what joins us to trees.
Yeah,
as well as
and
breathing.
I love that you use the word Sitopia to describe that whole arena, which is, you know, a self-sufficient, you know, self-sufficiency is freedom. That, you know, we should aim to be involved in constantly.
Yes, well, I mean, I think for me, you know, thinking about food and thinking about what it means to eat is just so profound, because it reminds us that, A, we don't eat alone. You know, in other words, when we're sitting around a table sharing food, we're really good at, you know, kind of making sure everyone's got enough and nobody takes the last biscuit off the plate and all of this sort of stuff. And I think, you know, when we share through food, and obviously, you know, also any plate of food has the whole world in it. You know, it's got nature in it, it's got culture in it, it's got everything there. And so, you know, I think when we moved from sharing through food to sharing through money, which is what we do now, you know, everything went to pot, basically, because, you know, money doesn't really exist, and we're very bad at sharing through money, and we're very secretive about it, and, you know, all of this Pandora papers, and, you know, everyone's squirreling the stuff away, and it's very sort of invisible, whereas food is extremely present and material. And I think our better instincts come out when we're around food. You know, we share well. So I'm very interested in asking, okay, how can we sort of translate those kinds of good vibes and good behaviors that are innate in us, because they are about survival, actually. You know, if you're living in a hunter-gatherer band, for example, if you're greedy, you know, you're going to get expelled by the group, you know, and the group actually works to keep everyone kind of sharing nicely and to keep their egos in place. So it's just a brilliant metaphor for me, you know, the shared meal, about how we should also live on the planet, I guess. But I mean, trees, sorry, you know, sort of going back to your world, I mean, the more I learn about the plant world, and I mean, obviously, again, food has led me to soil, and soil has led me to plants. And then you realize, for example, that, you know, the human microbiome is directly analogous to the plant rhizosphere, you know, and that our health and nutrition is all to do with complexity and, you know, the flourishing of non-human life, which, of course, I spoke about with Mark a lot, you know, because I was very moved by what he said about going into the biosphere, or actually the experiment he did just before going into the biosphere, and realizing, oh my goodness, you know, these plants I'm living with, if they die, I die. It's so fundamental. And he spoke about that visceral realization. I thought that was remarkable. So you must have had a similar epiphany, I'm imagining, at some point.
You know, when I first came back to land, I was a bit lost. After living on the sea for 3 years, and I went to live at the Synagia Ranch, which was one of the oldest, is the oldest project of the Institute of Ecotechnics, started in the 60s when they planted a 500-tree organic fruit orchard. So when I arrived there in the late 90s, the group had just all come back from Biosphere 2 after the whole story, and then they all came back to live in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I started living there in 1999 and started taking care of the trees. And for about 2 months, everybody went off to France for a conference, and I was left on my own with this orchard. And I was given the task of like covering up the stumps of these invasive trees, Russian olives that grow in the orchard. And it was the first time I had been given the responsibility of anything so large and magnificent in my life. And I was really awed by that, and became interested in what grows around a tree. How do you make a tree grow better? And then started to learn manure, how to prune trees when everybody came back. John Allen was a great tree pruner, so I learned a lot from him. And everybody as a group worked on the orchard, and it brought us all together for a common cause, which was to create the fruit that we wanted to eat and to keep us in all our vitamins and everything for the next year. Apricots, apples, pears, peaches, plums, walnuts, all kinds of fruit. I just really got into trees somehow.
Yeah.
But then I've always been an adventurer as well, and invited to go to the Rainforest Project in Puerto Rico by the previous director, Sally Silverstone, and ended up here in a whole new world, and very rustic. This project had just been hit by Hurricane George at that time. But I had no idea. I didn't have that sense of what that damage meant, because I was walking into a situation after a major disturbance. Anyway, over cutting a long story short, I got into the tree work by doing a lot of tree measuring and other research in the forest for 15 years. I've been up and down the slopes measuring trees, vines, frogs, birds, the everything, and got really immersed in this forest. But I kind of started, unlike you're starting with the soil. I started kind of with the canopies of the trees. That was my go-to to identify the trees, was look up. So this kind of floor of the forest is only in the last, I've been here 21 years. It has taken me maybe 18 years or so to get to the point where I really am getting, and I'm only just starting to get, the soil. Yeah. And that's, wow, if it's taken me this long and I'm here in this kind of environment, there is such a thing as blindness to soil, blindness to plants, etc.
Oh, for sure.
And I see those stages. I see all those stages in myself. And now I'm working with actually getting seeds from trees and learning the process of propagating and germinating cuttings and seeds. I have never done that in my life, so it's a whole new experience. But I have a whole lot of experience now to work with as well, So I feel very lucky, but I realize it's nearly a whole lifetime to learn something sometimes.
Well, I mean, I would say one of the aspects about a good life for me is one in which you keep on learning for your whole life. And I mean, to address directly the sort of, in a way, the question we've been posed about, what a new kind of university might look like that might, make people fit to kind of deal with the 21st century and so on. I mean, I think, what you've just described, which I find very moving and fascinating, is that in a way the trees and the forest have been your school, they've been your teachers, and I think that's incredibly profound. And, what you've decided to do and taken the time to do, as you say, kind of half your life, is just allow, immerse yourself in nature, observe it, learn from it, work with it, and so on, which, if you like, is on a microcosmic scale what we have to do at the major scale, at the scale of the planet. And, so one of the things I would certainly say that needs to happen, and very excitingly could happen, I believe, with the new school of the Anthropocene, is that, nature very much is our teacher, and we take time to look and to observe and to respond and to experiment, because I think, education has just turned into this kind of sausage machine for, turning out little students who can kind of, be immediately useful in the system and make money. And I mean, it's really, really shocking to me the degree to which our current government at least seems to have completely forgotten, what the point of civilization is, not to put too fine a point on it.
Yeah. I was very shocked by that term, vanity courses, that the guy. That was very shocking to me. If I hadn't been exposed to, all of the humanities and theatre, dance, music as a young person, I think it would be very different. And I see here in Puerto Rico, and who knows, the long-term consequences of that. There is no music in schools, there's no theatre in schools. This is like the general public schools. All of those kinds of arts are not considered viable, and they just don't exist within the curriculum. So, kids don't have a sense of belonging to a community of, let's say, a theatre group or something, putting a show on, that whole self-development and self-awareness that comes with theatre, dance, and all of those arts.
Absolutely.
And becoming active in whatever the local or the national, any kind of global topics that should be addressed with any of those forms, whether it's writing, dance, theatre, and knowing the power dynamics of any kind of structure that you're in as well. What is going on with everything? Those what he's calling vanity courses. I mean, it's
they all they can see is money. All they can see is wealth, making money, solving the problems of the world by just more technology. And I mean, as I was just saying, I think what is astonishing is that, what we've forgotten is that, if you think of Maslow's kind of pyramid, for example, solving the problems of the body, hunger and so on are the necessary precursors to actually doing the good stuff, like poetry and self-expression and philosophy and thinking and all the rest of it. And to say, to decapitate, ultimately, if you like, the goal of civilization, why we bother to do any of this stuff. I mean, and just to say it doesn't mean anything is, it's a real sign of a kind of a blindness, a deep blindness about what life is actually about, what it's for, why we're here.
Yeah, and Carolyn, in your conversation with Mark Nelson, you probably, and the media, you'll see the kind of derision that the Biosphere 2 team were dealt out with. The fact that they were theatre people became like, a bunch of theatre people, as if that was something. Coming to this project in Puerto Rico, after a major hurricane hit it, this was like 21 years ago. If I didn't have those skills, I wouldn't be here now, and potentially this project might not be here now. This is a very difficult place to live in. And it's also, you have to have many different hats to be able to, it's not just a scientific hat that I need to wear here. Yeah. And certainly if I did, I wouldn't be here. I would be out earning some money somewhere else and, whatever. Yeah. The people who go out into that world to get their PhDs, they're not going to come and try to make a sustainable forestry project work. It's,
for sure.
It's a life of passion. It's really not something that is highly profitable in that particular sense.
I think, this kind of, part of what the new school is trying to address is the sort of the dividing up of, life into silos, basically. And if you go back to the Renaissance, for example, this idea of the uomo universale, just that the person who knows everything and can do everything. And I think we're really reaching a point now, exactly as you say. And same is true in my background. I was very fortunate when I did study architecture that there were two teachers there, who I'll name. One of them still alive, Dalibor Vesely and Peter Carl, who brought the whole of culture to the table, and I will be forever grateful to them because they gave me permission to be a philosopher and to ask big questions and to ask what it's all about. And like you, without that, I would not be here. I'd be doing gutter details or whatever I'd be doing. I don't know. But, and I think we desperately, desperately need fully rounded humans, to cope with the kind of complexities that we face now. And also, I'd say something else, not just coping, but also thriving. I feel so blessed to have had so many kind of inputs in my life that, as you say, every day is just full of wonder. It's full of questions to be asked. It's full of new discoveries. And, that is really the essence of being human, is that the questioning side of you never switches off and you learn every day. And an education that can create that and that has that as its goal, I think, is, couldn't be more important or valuable.
I think that's a really important thing that you just, I just realized, you know, one of the things that I find most alarming is how young teachers are in the general scheme of public education. Definitely life experience, and you know, I was very lucky to have many older people in my life in times where they just blew my mind with all kinds of info, knowledge, transmission of various kinds. Yeah. And I don't think that young teachers, maybe, you know, it's never a blanket thing, but young 20-year-olds are not the best teachers for anything at all. And I think that is part of the system. Kids go straight to university, come out as teachers, and carry on the same old. Yeah. They don't have any life experiences. They don't have any philosophical experiences, technical experiences, practical experiences, nothing to pass on to young minds. Young minds that want and need and should have all of that. Yes. You know, my great meeting with John Allen, who was the founder of Biosphere 2, and then, of course, Mark and Chile and everybody as part of the Institute of Ecotechnics. Johnny just blew my mind when I first met him. And I realized, just like you said, he encouraged me. He never, ever told me what to do. And when I look back on it, I think, wow, it's true. Johnny never, and nobody ever in the Institute told me what to do. The groundwork was encourage the best that you can do in the field that you have decided to move into. Just do the best that you can. Yeah. Find out as much as you can, bring the right people around you. And that philosophy has worked. I'm a poster child for it. You know,
I would really agree. And I mean, I think, you know, another analogy for an ideal educational establishment would be good soil, you know, because if you chuck any old seed in good soil, it has the best possible chance of thriving, but it thrives as itself. The soil doesn't tell it what kind of plant to be. And certainly my teachers did that for me. They laid the world out for me. I mean, I'll never forget, you know, I obviously, you know, came across as the kind of person who was keen to look outside the sphere of architecture, because I'll never forget Dalibor, one of the books he gave to me when I was still, you know, I think in my degree even, was Carl Polanyi's Great Transformation, which remains one of the most transformative books I've ever read. Now, why he gave it to me, I've no idea, because actually he didn't give it to anyone else. But it must have been something about the conversation we were having, and he thought, oh, she needs this. And he was right, you know, so I felt absolutely encouraged, as you say, and buoyed up, but sort of also given permission. And it's really important. Yeah. And I really agree with you. I think it's a bit like this thing about, you know, I always say in food, you know, it's actually the grandparents that can teach the children, you know, because the parents are often too busy, you know, and the grandparents have time, they have the knowledge. And I think that relationship between grandparents and grandchildren is always magical. There's something about it. And I think that kind of relationship between pupils and teachers is also very, very valuable when the ego has disappeared from the field, basically. And often young people are still trying to make their way in the world, you know, trying to make their way and unsure of themselves. And what you want from a teacher is someone who's kind of, as you say, seen it all before, you know, hasn't become cynical, hasn't become kind of calcified, but just can be like a beautifully rich garden, to kind of let the students thrive. So
laying the ground.
Yeah, laying the ground. And also just making, you know, as you said, I mean, you learnt your trade on a ship, diving for coral, or looking at coral, studying coral, and then in a forest. I mean, I think, you know, the degree to which the university can get out of its ivory tower and actually allow students to just be in the world as they learn, you know, is really, really important too. And just getting away from the idea that the things that matter in life exist within some kind of weird academic discipline that got invented in the 19th century, you know, because I think you know, cross-disciplinary thinking. We've both said it, we've both experienced it, you know, how we are able to operate in the world now is absolutely based on the fact that we've had the broadest possible experience and the broadest possible education. And I certainly continue, you know, I'm most drawn to things I don't know about, because, you know, I always recognize the stuff you don't know about is likely to be most useful in you know, in taking me forward. So having that kind of very, very rich, diverse, complex, open sort of scenario, I think is with a beautiful vision for a kind of new kind of university.
Yeah, and I definitely think that working in groups is a way to go. Whether, you know, here we are in the pandemic era working on Zoom, etc., but it's really important to keep up that human contact. And you know, many people can do something. It's very difficult as a solo person to do anything. And that's one thing that I've really learned, is that, you know, Johnny once said to me, any old fool can run a project, but what's most difficult is working with other people. So, you know, our lives are, you know, tending the gardens of people that we surround ourselves with. How do we manage to work with people over the long term? And I think that's really important in whatever we're doing, whether it's farming, whatever, forestry work, etc.
Yeah. Really agree with that. Really agree with that.
Yeah.
Well, you know, we evolved as a kind of collaborative species. You know, we spent most of our history hunting and gathering and cooperating in small groups. And I think it's hardwired in us to work like that and to thrive like that if we're allowed to. And as you say, we just happen to live in a world that doesn't allow us either that, or the time to observe, as we've talked about before, or the opportunity to make stuff with our hands, which I personally believe is vital. And also, you know, which is why another reason I'm so passionate about food, because it seems to me that, you know, the fact that we have to eat every day is such a great opportunity to make stuff, you know. I just think it's giving young people permission to say what they think and to take control and to have ideas and to set up projects and to actually feel, you know, they can do it, and that we need them and want them to do that. So we need to be their enablers.
Yeah, practicality, I think, is also key, and to be ready, willing, and able. You know, give people the chance to do things and encourage them.
Yeah.
It's been really great to have your ideas and converse with you on.
Thank you. I was just going to say one final thing. I actually said in my book, I said, the kind of people we need to be educating and producing and encouraging and nurturing is the kind of person that if you were stranded on a desert island and you could design your ideal companion, what would that person be like? You know, and if you imagine that person, that's the kind of person we need to be nurturing. Capable, you know, skillful, knowledgeable, humorous, just able to kind of to live independently. Because if you can live independently, then you can live in groups as well.
Yeah. And I have one more to add. I have one more word to add to that. Courageous, to learn courage, to be courageous and bold. I find that that's something, as a woman, I've had to keep working at my whole life, how to be more courageous about things and more bold and to speak out. You know, I feel like nobody ever taught me how to do that. I'm learning it all my life, and maybe that's just the way it is.
I completely agree with that. And the whole time I was writing both of my books, I was terrified because they're huge. You know, they're subjects way beyond my theoretical competence. But I just kept going because I was so passionate about it. And now people look at me as if, of course, you should have written a book about, you know, how food shapes civilization. And I'm going, well, actually, from the inside, that felt pretty scary. But I mean, as you say, I just gave myself permission.
Yeah, I think confidence, learning what confidence is also a very important part of any learning program. And I feel that confidence is the ability or finding the ability within you to act to actually get out there and act, the action after, you know, the confidence, the courageousness, whatever it is, but it gives you the ability to act. And I think confidence is a very under-examined human way of being, you know. Anyway,
as indeed I've agreed with you all the way through this conversation. And you know, just to say that, you know, what capitalism does is it makes people think that they're only allowed to be consumers, and we actually all need to be producers. And that's flipping a kind of very big orthodoxy on its head, but I couldn't agree more. People who are just prepared to go out there and lead, live life, do stuff, collaborate, and think of that as leading a real life, a proper life, a good life, not as something out of the ordinary or special. It needs to become normal.
Yeah.